Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen, and we are going to be talking about the Kell Brook or Terence Crawford Kell Brook fight from last night. Had the chance to watch it again, and also to slow-mo down the finish of the fight because I'm, boring like that, and probably in loads of other ways. But yeah, just want to talk about the fight and what's next for both men. So, kind of predictable start, I would say. In that, I think I said last week on our Flex Expectations preview show that Kell Brook is generally a faster starter, Terence Crawford not so much. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Brook take some of the early rounds. And that seems to be the case. Certainly the first two I thought were Brook rounds. He established his jab early on and his timing, especially for someone who'd been out of the ring for as long as he had and the age he is, were very good. Was very good. But I thought the pivotal change was when Terence Crawford began to box mostly from the southpaw stance from round 3. He seemed to get Brook's measure and distance a lot better from the southpaw stance than he had before. He managed to place his right foot outside of Brook's left foot, so winning the battle of those lead foots when it's southpaw against orthodox, and that helped him establish his own jab from about round 3. And then from then on, he liberally used feints to draw Brook out. I mean, they both did, but Crawford used them more frequently, trying to get Brook to lead off. Both kind of natural counter punchers, tried to get Brook to lead off so he could get in with his sharper counters. And that was kind of a prelude to what was coming in round 4. And we'll try and kind of break down the finish of the fight for people that haven't seen it, or even for people that have, but didn't kind of slow it down or anything. So they were both feinting their jabs in front of each other in centre ring. Crawford feinted a couple of times up top, which Brook kind of, I don't even want to say parried because they weren't serious jabs, they were more rangefinders. But he did put his glove up to meet Crawford's lead. Then Crawford feinted downstairs, but kind of fell short. Feinted upstairs again, which Brook came out to meet. So he was just kind of lulling him into a false sense of security. It was kind of a chess match, feeling each other out. And then suddenly, Crawford got, as we said earlier, got his right foot, his lead foot, outside Brook's lead foot, the left, and switched on an angle, so turned to his right, so anti-clockwise. And Brook stayed static, couldn't follow him quickly enough because it was very sudden movement, and landed a right hand. Now, a lot of people have said it's a jab, that Brook got hurt by a jab. But if you slow it right down, you can see that Crawford not only turns on the angle to open up the whole of Brook's left side, but he also bends the arm, bends the elbow as he throws the punch. So it's more of a short right hook as he turns. And it's so quick and such on Brook's blind side because his footwork, his feet weren't quite quick enough to keep up with Crawford's sudden movement that he couldn't react to it. And he just took a short, sharp right hook flush on the jaw. And that knocked him back, stumbling into the ropes. And Crawford went to follow up, but referee Tony Weeks quite rightly judged that the ropes had held Brook up and started tolling a mandatory 8 count. Brook assured Weeks that he was okay, but even as he was saying so, he was kind of shaking his head, dabbing at his nose and the side of his face because he still seemed dazed to an extent or buzzed. He couldn't quite understand what had hit him. He obviously felt like it was a jab and he'd never been hurt like that from a jab before. But as I said, if you slow it down, it's actually a short, very short right hook and a cracking shot from the blind side and with no kind of warning, no setup to it. It was a lead shot. But Brook successfully assured Tony Weeks that he was okay to continue. Crawford quickly followed up, got on the front foot, probably for the first time in the fight where he was consistently on the front foot, backed Brook up to the ropes, landed a nice right hand. And then as he followed up, Brook stumbled once again to the opposite set of, or the adjacent set of strands, stumbled back. Weeks jumped in before it could get any worse. And I think, although Brook protested, and you could see why, because he hadn't taken kind of a real meaty, clean shot, he hadn't gone down again, he did seem in disarray and open to taking further punishment, which, with a puncher of Crawford's stature, could have been quite dangerous. So no real problems with the stoppage. It all seemed to be, the fight seemed to have turned by that point. It seemed to be going one way. Brave effort from Brook, looked sharp considering how long he's been out the ring. But Crawford proved that when it came to the crunch, and early on in the fight as well, that he had the power, the sharpness, the speed, and the boxing IQ to win pretty much when he wanted to. Still a good win for Crawford over a guy that came in with excellent credentials and great ability, but not the Kell Brook, if we're honest, of 3 to 5 years ago. And nor should he be. Who would expect that? One thing I would say before we move on to what's next for both men is that a lot was made in the build-up, not just of Brook making weight, but how much bigger he'd be in the ring on fight night, and I was one of them that bought into that. But looking at the fight back, didn't look like a great deal of difference in size in the ring. I don't know what the on-the-night weights were, if they were publicised, but they looked pretty similar size. Crawford's obviously now, he's been welterweight for a while, he's grown into a 147-pounder, didn't look out of place. Kell Brook certainly didn't look to have a massive size advantage, just an advantage in kind of timing and accuracy for the first 2 rounds, and after that it was pretty much all Crawford. But now thought turns to what's next for both men, and we'll start with the guy who unfortunately came up short, Kell Brook. Been out the ring for ages before this, credit for stepping up, found wanting, and conclusively there's not going to be any calls for a rematch. But will he now retire? He's not been particularly active over the last few years anyway, but it will, I guess, niggle at him that he hasn't been able to get that real elite win, certainly since Sean Porter way back. He'll want to kind of carry on and see. Maybe eventually the Khan fight can still be made. I know we've talked about this for years now, but it's possible. He's coming off a defeat. They both lost to Crawford, but it could still do decent business in the UK, you would think, the grudge match. Maybe with the carrot of a world title shot or an elite level fight for the winner. Who knows? But Brook needs to have a serious think about it, because if he can't compete at the top level, he's shown in the past that he hasn't really got that motivation, not only to train regularly, but just generally to keep going in the sport. He waited around for ages. He's turned down fights that haven't been at that top level. He really needs a big challenge to get his juices flowing. And if those fights aren't made available to him anymore, it might be time. He's got a young family. It might be time to think about knocking it on the head, especially if this fight, he was reportedly paid $2 million for this. If that's kind of set him up now where he doesn't need to box anymore, it might be time to happily go home, spend time with the family, get fat, and be happy. He's earned it. Although he didn't get another elite level win after Porter, so many boxers out there never get to the level Kell Brook got to anyway. He'll be remembered as a really good fighter and an exciting fighter. And there's a lot worse things you can do. So, yeah, I'd like to see him call it a day now, but the only person who can truly decide is the boxer themselves. Not just because it's their right, but also because if their heart's not in a retirement, they're only going to come back eventually anyway. And the longer you leave it, the more dangerous that proposition becomes. So we'll see what he decides. But moving on to Crawford, who looked just as good as he ever has at the age of, 33, I think he is. Still looks really good. No problems with his sharpness or his reactions or his ability to take shots. He's a ruthless finisher as well. And he said after the fight, he wants the Manny Pacquiao fight. Pacquiao, of course, we said in a previous video, was the original first choice for him on this date, but he ended up fighting Brook because the Pacquiao fight didn't come together. He still wants that, potentially in the Middle East, where Pacquiao is obviously huge business. But you can see from Pacquiao's point of view why Crawford would have a lot more to gain from the fight. Pacquiao's legacy secure. He's a living legend. Whoever he fights is going to make a lot of money. It's going to generate a lot of pay-per-view buys. So the power is very much in Pacquiao's hands. He's already beaten one of the kind of younger guys in Keith Thurman. If he decides he doesn't want to fight a Crawford or a Spence, who've got a lot more to gain in terms of profile and getting Manny Pacquiao's name on their ledger, you can't really blame him. It's completely up to him. I would obviously like to see Crawford fight someone of that top level now. We've wasted a lot of time with him fighting kind of A-, B+ level fighters. No disrespect to them, but he looks a special talent, and he's in danger of letting that talent kind of wither on the vine. He's already a 3-weight world champion. He was undisputed at 140, but he lacks that top name on his ledger. And we want to see that. So if it's not going to be Pacquiao, why not the winner of Errol Spence against Danny Garcia? That's a very exciting fight coming up. Deals would have to be made. Spence and Garcia both with PBC, of course, Crawford with Top Rank. But it's time to put all that aside. We're in a pandemic. We want to make the biggest fights possible. Spence isn't getting any younger either. He's coming off that car crash, of course, as well. We don't know how good he's going to look or not against Garcia. So now is very much the time after the Garcia fight, assuming he comes through it, is to make, finally, Crawford against Spence. And it might not be a massive success on pay-per-view because they haven't got that crossover name just yet. In those cases, Spence probably more so has than Crawford, but neither of them are superstars just yet. But maybe the winner of that, if the fight's built up correctly and the build-up's done right, maybe the winner of that becomes a superstar. And then maybe that guy fights Pacquiao and on more of a level playing field. I mean, it'll never be completely level. Pacquiao's the star, but it will be closer than it is now. And it will make it more likely that it will be able to entice the senator into a fight. But yeah, I'd really like to see that next for Crawford. But he proved far too good in the end for a very brave Kell Brook last night. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know your takes on the fight below and also what you'd like to see next for both men. I'll be back with reflections, looking back over the whole weekend of boxing tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. Thank you.